My sil invited me on an all-women family vacation, but when I arrived at the airport, I got a shocking picture from her that sent me rushing home to save my husband. Now she's furious because no one in the family wants anything to do with her. I, 27, female, have been with my husband Aaron, 27 male, for 3 years. We've known each other for 6 years. He has an older sister, Sophie, 30 female. And that's who's caused this entire commotion in the family that I am going to talk about. So 3 weeks ago, Sophie asked me if I'd be willing to accompany her on an all-women family holiday to Spain with her, my mother-in-law, and my husband's cousin Nadia, 27 female. Nadia and Aaron are a lot closer than he and Sophie in spite of being first cousins as opposed to biological siblings. Because they were in the same grade and went to the same high school. So as a result, I'm a lot closer to Nadia as well. Initially, I wasn't too inclined to go on a family vacation, because I didn't think it'd be that fun with Sophie and my mother-in-law. But afterwards, Nadia and I had a chat. And she told me that she wanted a break. So she was willing to go and wanted me to come along too. She convinced me and I agreed to go on the trip. Sophie was the one sponsoring the flight tickets and the stay at the hotel, which wasn't a problem for her whatsoever because she was filthy rich, thanks to her husband who's a neurosurgeon. She runs an event management company, but everyone knows that the company pretty much runs itself. She just doesn't want to come off as a socialite who doesn't work. She has a degree in literature, but she's never used it and believes that college had been a total waste of time for her, except for the part where she met her current husband through a friend of hers at a party. Aaron has told me that Sophie has been spoiled rotten by her parents ever since childhood and whatever she wanted, she got. That has extended into adulthood, and even now she thinks that just sulking, pouting, and the silent treatment will be enough to manipulate people into doing what she wants. It doesn't help that her husband and her parents still encourage such infantile behavior. But Aaron, Nadia, and I know when to ask her to cut the crap, so she doesn't try to behave the same way with us. If I'm being honest, I've never particularly liked Sophie. But since she's never been outright mean to me, I put up with her for the sake of the family. Anyway, I agreed to go on that trip with her. And 3 days back, we were finally about to leave. The airport is kind of far away from my house, so I had to leave early, and I ended up reaching there about half an hour early as well. I was pretty bored while waiting for the rest of the party to arrive, so I decided to go scroll through my phone instead. That morning itself, unfortunately, my phone's vibration motor stopped working. And so it wasn't buzzing whenever I received a notification like it usually does. I didn't have the time to repair it that day, so I decided I'd do it once I returned from the holiday. It was purely by luck that I had been on my phone when I received the message. I received an image from Sophie where she'd sent me the screenshot of text she'd received from a number I didn't recognize. The conversation had an image followed by a text. And once I downloaded it, I opened the image to check out the contents because it felt bizarre that Sophie was sending me the screenshot of someone else's conversation. As soon as I did, my blood froze, because the picture had been clicked right outside of my house by someone who had a pair of scissors in their left hand. Within seconds, I received another message from the same number. Tell your darling brother's wife that I'm back. Sophie followed that screenshot up by saying that she'd received this text from an unknown number a couple of minutes ago, and that she was terrified because she thought Aaron was in danger now. That was all I needed to go into panic mode because I actually have a history of being stalked. And it was literally the single most terrifying phase of my life. Back when I was in college, I had a stalker who would randomly click pictures of me from the back and send them to me throughout the day. He wouldn't text me on my number, but would use dummy social media accounts to talk to me. He'd ask me to meet him at certain spots, but he'd never show up. I wouldn't go unarmed, and I was trained in jiu-jitsu. But even then, I felt very afraid of what would happen. This went on for 2 whole months, and I didn't tell anyone because I was scared of what he might do if I did. Initially, I tried to get the guy to stop, but he texted me and told me that if I breathed even a word of this to anyone, then I'd be in big trouble. And had even sent me a similar picture from right outside my parents' house to threaten me, scissors and all. I was terrified. So I didn't tell anyone and just kept silently praying for my safety whenever I'd have to attend classes. After the first few weeks, I stopped leaving my dorm room for anything but classes and food. And eventually, it got to a point where I refused to leave my room at all because I kept receiving pictures of myself so frequently. It was then that my roommate finally realized that something was wrong and forced me to tell her. And after that, we went to the police to report this. Within a few days, an arrest had been made. And very ironically, it happened to be a guy from the computer engineering department. He was a senior and had a history of making girls on campus feel creeped out or harassed. Unfortunately, he'd taken a liking to me, and so he started stalking me. And because he specialized in cyber safety, he was able to find out a lot about me from my social media accounts, which happened to be public at the time. He'd also simultaneously been stalking another girl who hadn't reported this for the same reasons as me. Once he was caught, he was kicked out of college, and that was the end of him terrorizing me and other women. From what I heard, his parents took him back after a couple of days, and he ended up back in his home country. It's been several years since that, and I had almost forgotten about him. But as soon as I saw that image, all the terror came rushing back, and I instantly called 911. I told Sophie to get to my house ASAP. But luckily, forgot to mention that I called the cops already because I was more concerned about trying to warn Aaron instead. I got a cab within minutes and started trying to call my husband desperately because I knew that he was still asleep. It was 8 in the morning at the time, and my husband has a tendency to sleep late on the weekends. So I knew it wouldn't be easy for me to get through to him. But luckily, he did answer me when I called. I could tell that he'd just woken up because he sounded drowsy, but I didn't have time to spare. So I told him to arm himself with something heavy, lock himself in the bedroom, and block the door somehow. He was confused. But as soon as I mentioned the picture, he told me he understood and did as I told him. I stayed on call with him throughout the 45-minute cab ride home, even as the cops arrived and inspected the house. I did not check my phone in the meantime. And since the vibration feature was gone, I wasn't getting any physical reminders from the notifications to remind me either. By the time I reached home, their inspection was almost over, and they hadn't found anyone suspicious in the vicinity. I was having a full-blown panic attack by the time I reached home, and it took me several minutes and a half a bottle of water to finally calm down. The cops told me that they'd run the phone number through the system, and the only name that had come up was Theo Wilson. That wasn't my stalker's name. But a fake name for his phone number would be totally feasible. By then, I'd forgotten about Sophie and my phone and hadn't checked it in a while because I was just so relieved to see that Aaron was safe. The cops who'd come to my house informed me that they'd sent 2 cops separately to pay this person a visit after the cybercrime department had tracked the sender and were currently bringing them to the police station. Aaron and I headed over to the nearest police station. Within a few minutes of our arrival, Sophie was dragged in by 2 cops while she sobbed violently. I think most people have been able to guess what happened by now. And, yeah, it's exactly what you guys think. For whatever reason, Sophie had thought that it would be a good idea to pull a prank on me this morning just to mess with me a little before our trip. She'd met a friend of mine from college for work a couple of days back. And, of course, I'd come up while they were discussing families. And once they discovered the connection, my old college mate told her all about my stalker in college, which was something I became very popular for. I'm not bragging, but after the stalker incident, my popularity among the students and teachers alike had pretty much skyrocketed because everyone likes a good scandal. I never thought it was fun to be pointed out and whispered about, but people had remembered, and I guess we're still talking about it. After finding out about my past stalker, Sophie had decided that she was going to prank me on the morning of our flight, and it'd be fun.